Next, I would like to welcome Evany Thomas to the stage. Evany Thomas currently runs the content and writing team at Pinterest. Previously, she's been a content strategist at Facebook, Wells Fargo, Yahoo, and Friendster. She's the author of The Secret Language of Sleep and has presented to audiences far and wide. So please welcome Evany to the stage.
Woo. Okay, thanks. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, good. I'm gonna try walking out here. This is kind of like the theater in the round. So glad you guys are here. Let me get my little clicker. For the next 15 minutes, I am excited to be talking to you about some of my very favorite failures along the way to the very top of my profession. See, there it is. How to fall hard, fail big, and flail epically. That's what we're gonna learn how to do today. I'm telling you these things so hopefully you guys can maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I've made, but also, more importantly, for you guys to understand that it is totally okay to fail. And in fact, if you are risking the amount, if you're taking the big enough risk that you should to succeed, you really should expect to fail. If you're not failing at all, that means you're not pushing yourself hard enough. But let's just take a look at some of the ways I've failed, and you can decide for yourself. Okay. So, like a lot of people's stories, mine starts in childhood. I would say around when you're at 8 or 9, people start asking you what you're going to be when you grow up. Does this still happen? Let me ask. Do people ask you what you want to be when you grow up? Never? All right. Good. Well, I'm glad that's over. So one of the things that was so hard for me about that is that I didn't know. I've always been someone who failed to have goals, and I always was so envious of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. They had laser focus on wanting to be an astronaut, and they just knew what courses they should take or what grades they should get. For me, I was pretty good at writing. I really liked to draw. I sort of like photography. My mother had given me a fun camera when I was really young, and I used it whenever I could, and we developed, at great expense, a lot of blurry photos. But ultimately, I was not that great at any one of them. And I was definitely like B+ student all the way. Like there was never any clear sign like, oh, she's gonna be a future writer or genius or anything like that. So this was a question that would always make me clam up and feel completely tense. And just to give you a little bit of context, when I was in my tweens, it was in the early 80s. So no internet. In fact, telephones were mounted to the wall. And you were tethered by this bouncy cord that limited you to a 5-foot radius. There was no voicemail. If you were on the phone when someone called, they got a busy signal. Does anyone know what the busy signal sounds like? What does it sound like? It's like, okay. There was also televisions in that time. They were as deep as they were wide. No remote control. So if you were really comfortable on the couch and your show ended, you just kept watching whatever was on next. And also, this was my typewriter. This is when I was heading off to college, and I was so excited because it was the cutting edge of technology. And what was so exciting about it is do you see that teeny little screen on it? It looks like a calculator. That was a screen where all of a whole sentence could be typed in and edited before it printed. And you had to commit, once you hit return, it printed it out on paper. You couldn't move stuff around, though, at all. Like the whole idea of word processing today, this is so, you're everywhere. Word processing is you could move paragraphs around, or you could change your mind about a word. Here, you printed it all out, and if you realized you left a word out, you had to do the whole page over because there was just no going back. So this is just to give you a little context. There was no internet. There was nothing going on that anything is like with the industry that I work in now today. There wasn't even a glimmer of that. So one of the things that I kind of learned along the way was, of course I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up because the world hadn't become what I needed it to become for me to find my thing, right? So it wasn't until 1996, and I was in my 26, 27, that the internet happened. And I finally had that feeling that all those other jerks who knew exactly what they wanted to be when they were growing up, when they were age 9, I was 26, and I finally had that feeling. And I was like, oh, I can do a little writing. I can do a little design. I can do a little photography. I can do a little bit of, there's sort of an artistic element in playing with the color of the fonts. And this was a website. I called it my online diary. This is before blogs. The word blog did not even exist at this moment. And so this is a pretty popular site, I will say so. It helped that there was maybe 200 websites on the whole internet, so therefore to shine didn't take much. But I did get the attention of Wired magazine, and they had their own online presence, and it was winning a ton of awards on its own, of course. Didn't hurt that it was one of the very few websites. But they, what was so cool about what they were doing is they were really pushing what you could do on the internet and how to build websites. And they started a whole new tutorial website because people kept emailing into Wired Digital and saying, how did you guys make the image move? This is a long time ago. And everyone was dialing up on their 14.4 modems. Does everyone remember that sound? Okay. People were dialing up there, and but actually there were visuals, and it was almost animating, and it was the most amazing thing. And so people kept emailing in and asking how they did that, so they decided to get the tech people who were making it happen to explain it and write tutorials, and we actually created a little website. It was called WebMonkey. It was really fun. It was actually, my office space was 3 blocks from here, so it's all come full circle. But what was so great about it is that not only did I get to use all my new web skills that I had just discovered by doing my website, and I got paid for it, but the real skill was that it was my B+ brain. Because what I had to do is take these really techie articles and make them really easy for people who didn't have a lot of smarts, B+ people like me, and make it sense for those kind of people. So I've always talked about myself as like, I'm a good litmus test for the average man. If it makes sense to me, it's gonna make sense to a lot of people, and so I can bring that to the table. And it was one of those moments where not only do I get to do what I love, but I got to get paid for it. And it was also kind of affirming that you don't have to be the best at everything to really contribute something. So of course, like all good things, or many good things, it ended pretty abruptly and with much sadness when the whole internet exploded, first time. It's happened multiple times since then. But this is when we first heard of the notion of the bubble bursting. And it was so sad because I'd found this perfect job. I'd been there for many years, and I had just finally figured it all out. And it just basically completely hit me from the side. I did not see it coming at all. But one thing I learned, and maybe this is familiar to you, I'm hoping this is gonna play. Okay, so if you're walking along, things are going great, and you're really sure, oh my God! That's what it felt like. So suddenly I was laid off. I didn't have to get up in the morning. I just lay there in bed, but I noticed something that was like, your whole perspective changes suddenly. And you're just staring around, and you're like, okay, wait, from this point of view, I have a chance to look at my life and try something totally different. So what I did is I wrote a book, a very weird book, illustrated. It tells you the secret meaning hidden inside your sleeping position. It's purely fictional. And illustrated. And this is actually my boyfriend and I, right when we first met, and now we are married and have a kid. So there's actually kind of a lovely book that was just capturing the moment of falling in love as well. But it, didn't make a ton of money, but it was enough money to at least sort of exist for a while. It did pretty well. It was printed in Russian, it was printed in German, Chinese, and I got to go around the country telling people about what their sleeping pose meant. It was a very weird time, but also it was a good time for me to, for the first time ever, do public speaking. I'd never done that. I was a nervous public speaker. This really, really wrenched that out of me by forcing me to get up in front of people and basically tell made-up stuff to them as though it was the truth. I also started doing some fun other jobs, like freelance things, and I did some man-on-the-street interviews for the Sundance Film Festival. So on Park City, I would be wandering around, and I'd approach civilians or superstars and just ask them the most random. But actually, I should say at this point, I was 12 weeks pregnant, and for a while I was asking people to help name my baby, which was also weird. But just having a really good time trying out different parts of what I could be as a writer. And I also did, I had a baby too. And I was 39 years old at this point. It's a pretty late in the game to get the baby out there. But it was definitely something that I'd always wanted to do, and I was glad to sort of get under the deadline wire and get it out there. But at that point, I was definitely casting around. I always talk about this moment in time where, do you know the Social Security Administration sends you that newsletter of you, and it shows you how much you've made in your life? Do you know what and it comes, and this one came at one of those moments where it was like, it had showed a chart, and it was like, here's when you worked at Starbucks, and when you first got out of college, and here's this year, and it was the exact same amount, and I was like, oh, I think it's time for me to have a real career finally, again, so at the age of 39. So at this time, the social network, aka Facebook, there was a job opening there. I was scared out of my mind to go work there because I knew they're pretty hardcore, and there's a lot of elbow throwing, and they're moving fast, and they're breaking things, and they're basically talking right over you. But I had that moment of like, well, and I had a new baby. It was like a 10-month-old baby. Like, is this the time I want to really go for it? But I had that feeling like, oh man, if I'm this afraid, that's probably a really good sign that I should just go for it and give it a whirl. And it was amazing. It was like grad school in the best and worst possible way. It is very hard. You have to talk about being the only woman in the room. I was like the only 40-year-old woman. My favorite question to ask like 17-year-old men, which is the whole place was covered with, was, I was like, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions for me as a woman in my 40s. You must be so curious. And they'd just be like, they would curl up in a ball. But so this is another one of my favorite failures. And this is even worse than the time I got my French braid caught in front of in a tree in front of Mark Zuckerberg's office. And I was there for a good 3.5 minutes. And he had like the biggest VIPs around. It was like 25 men around a conference table, and me like laughing. But also the next day I came by and that tree had been completely denuded of all branches, which is one of my favorites. I just imagine Mark being like, we're gonna need a tree trimmer. So yeah, this is a big failure moment. It happened, this is where the campus was. I was in the 4th building in on the top, gigantic, lots of stuff going on. And I was actually in a meeting with Zuck, which is what we called Mark. And he's like, oh my God, we have a Zuck review. Oh shit. You gotta go get in front of Zuck and pitch something. It's like a terrifying day. You definitely put on deodorant. You figure out what you're gonna wear. So I had a Zuck review. I came in, I'd come up with 3 ideas for a way we could solve this problem. And he said, great, that sounds reasonable. And actually, this is a really good, you don't know this, but this is a really good impression. That sounds reasonable. He's like, but that third option, like, are we worried about the ramifications of blah, 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 blah? And he like basically asked me a very detailed question. And of course, things move fast there. And I had come up with these ideas literally 24 hours beforehand. My hope was that once we found a direction, I would really go dig in and find all the answers. But he asked me there on the spot. And instead of saying, hey, I was hoping I'd have another 24 hours to really go deeper on this, I just started making stuff up. And it's, you know that feeling where it just like washes over you. And you're trailing off and you don't know where your sentence is gonna end. And it was nightmarish. I felt like flashes of heat. And he just looked at me, he blinked, and then turned to the man next to him and just topic changed, never even looked at me again. And it was like, oh my God. And I went home, like I went to my desk and I was like, I'm fired. And I couldn't sleep that night. And ultimately it was like, oh, like just felt like just mortifying. I couldn't talk about anything else. But the next afternoon, I rallied enough to send him an email saying like, hey, here's a follow-up on that question. I've had a chance to think about it more, blah, 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 blah. And by the end of the next week, I had almost completely forgotten about it. So the lesson I learned there was, A, next time you don't know what the hell you're talking about, just say that. And I love it when I'm interviewing someone to hire them and they say, you know what, I don't have an answer for that question, but I'd love to get back to you later. And it's like, yes, ask for what you need. Admit when you don't know it. But I also learned that some of these things that feel like your soul has been crushed actually don't really matter in the big scheme of things, and you can roll past them really quickly. Okay, one last failure. We've got 1:30 to go. After a number of years, I'm doing my intense grad school training at Facebook. A little company called Pinterest had gotten its start, and I actually had worked with one of the co-founders at Facebook. And I just loved this product. It was something so nice about Pinterest. I don't know, how many here use Pinterest? Great, that is so good to see. Good. What I love about it is it's this place where you can plan about what you are gonna cook next. It could be your dream house. It could be how you wanna retire, how you wanna live the rest of your life. You're thinking about things like, when parents die, you start thinking like, wow, I've got a limited time here. Am I doing all the things I want to do? That's what Pinterest is for. And so after spending a number of years at Facebook, I was ready to go to a place that I loved the product. So I was so excited. The way they interview when you're a writer in this world, is that they have you come in and do a 45-minute presentation about who you are and what you bring to the table and how you would mix up what they are already doing and what you would contribute to the job. And so I was so excited. I stayed up really late practicing. I found a pin for how I wanted to do my hair, and I came up with a really new, it's actually very similar to this braid. And I got there, went to the front desk, and they said, we don't have any record of you here. It turns out I was a week early for my job interview. It was like so mortifying, and I tried to back out of there like really like cool. Oh, well that's okay, I'll just come back later, it's fine. And so I went, and I was like, I guess I have taken the day off work, I'll just go to the movies. And so I'm in the movies, and I get a text, and they're like, hey, we're all assembled, where are you? We got everyone together, the founders are all here, we want to hear your presentation. So it's like, so I got in a cab, went back to the office, gave this really strange talk that felt a little sweatier than I had intended, but I got the job. And I've been there for a good 6+ years, which is an eternity in this business. And I have become, for the first time ever, embraced the role of managing, worked my way up. I now run the whole writing team. It's one of those things where you talk about, oh, at the age of 48, which is what I am now, I finally figured out what it is I wanted to be when I grew up. And it's basically doing the thing I love at a place that I love. So I can only hope that you guys can fail as epically as I did over and over and over again. And these are just a few of the failures. There are many more where that came from. But hoping that you can learn and get stronger as you go and land where you want to be. Thank you. Woo!